The silence in the communications room felt heavier than usual. 5 years of mapping asteroid compositions and running mineral analyses had made the small outpost feel like home to its 12-person crew. They worked in the darkness between stars, far from Earth's crowded orbits, doing work that mattered but rarely made headlines. Dr. Neil Richards stared at the screen, showing 37 ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They materialized like predators surrounding wounded prey, their hulls painted in colors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He recognized the design from intelligence briefings. Drouthy Empire warships. "They're hailing us," said Yuki, her fingers dancing across the console. "Audio only. They want everyone to hear this." The message came through in flawless English, translated by algorithms that had studied human transmissions for who knew how long. The voice dripped with amusement. "Attention, human insects. This is War Leader Thrak of the Drouthy Third Fleet. Your little metal box has been selected for an important demonstration. You creatures from soft worlds think you can scatter across our territory like seeds on the wind. You build your fragile stations and systems we have claimed for 3,000 years. This ends now." Neil felt his jaw tighten. Around him, the other crew members stopped their work. Annie stopped mid-reach for coffee cup. David's hand hovered over his keyboard. Thrak continued, his tone shifting from amusement to contempt. "We have studied your species. You live on a gentle world with soft rains and comfortable temperatures. You have never known true hardship. You play at being explorers, but you are children wandering into a forest full of wolves. In one of your hours, we will turn your outpost into debris. Use this time to evacuate in your pathetic escape pods. Run home and tell your leaders that the Drouthy do not share." The transmission ended. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Annie laughed. Not a nervous laugh or a scared laugh. A genuine, from-the-belly laugh that broke the tension like shattering glass. "Gentle world?" she said, wiping her eyes. Did he just call Earth a gentle world? David joined her laughter. "Soft rains and comfortable temperatures. Oh man, someone should tell him about the year Florida got hit by 5 hurricanes in 6 weeks." Neil allowed himself a thin smile. He pulled up his personal terminal and began typing authorization codes. "Yuki, send the standard evacuation alert to nearby sectors. Make it look desperate. On it, boss." David, Annie, start warming up the defense grid. Protocols 7 through 12. Annie's laughter stopped. Her expression shifted to something harder, something that spoke of other times and other battles. "All 12 protocols, Chief. That's enough firepower to hold off a battle group." "They brought 37 ships to kill 12 scientists," Neil said quietly. "They want to make a point. Let's make sure they understand ours." The outpost had been built to look like a standard research facility. Solar panels, communication arrays, the usual scattered equipment pods connected by pressurized tunnels. What the Drouthy ships weren't detecting were the weapon platforms hidden inside hollowed asteroids, the shielding generators disguised as geological survey equipment, or the fact that every single crew member had served in Earth's military before retiring to civilian research. Neil had fought in the water wars in Asia. Annie had piloted gunships over the burn zones in North America. David had been an engineer in the underground cities, keeping life support running while the surface froze during the volcanic winter of 2089. Yuki had served on the first Mars defense platforms when the colony riots threatened to go nuclear. They weren't scientists who had learned to fight. They were soldiers who had learned science because war finally ended and they needed something else to do with their lives. Neil pulled up the encrypted channel to Earth Military Command. His fingers moved automatically, typing the codes he'd hoped never to use. "Command, this is Outpost 77 Romeo. Contact with Drouthy forces. Hostile intent confirmed. Requesting authorization to implement defensive protocols and evaluate threat assessment. Time to first engagement, 53 minutes. The response would take 6 minutes due to light speed lag. 6 minutes to wait while the Drouthy fleet arranged itself into attack formation. 6 minutes while Thrak probably celebrated what he thought would be an easy victory. Neil watched the tactical display. The Drouthy ships moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves to catch any escape pods that might launch. They weren't just planning to destroy the outpost. They planned to hunt down survivors, probably to make recordings of desperate humans begging for mercy. Propaganda material. Yuki, are they recording this? Neil asked. She nodded. Broadcasting on multiple frequencies. They want other species to see what happens when someone enters Drouthy's space. Good, Neil said. Let them watch. The response from Earth Command came through. 3 words that changed everything. Authorization granted. Respond appropriately. Neil looked at his crew. These people who had survived Earth's worst decades, who had rebuilt civilization from ashes and ice, who had earned their peace through blood and sacrifice. They looked back at him with eyes that understood what was about to happen. They wanted to make an example. Neil said, let's teach them why humanity doesn't make good victims. Outside, the Drouthy fleet tightened its formation. Inside the outpost, 12 veterans prepared to remind the galaxy what Earth had forged in its fires. Annie's hands moved across the weapon's control panel like a pianist returning to a familiar instrument. The interface responded to her touch, awakening systems that had been dormant but never truly sleeping. Green lights began replacing amber standby indicators across the board. Defense grid coming online, she reported. Asteroid platforms A through K responding. Power signatures nominal. Neil pulled up the crew roster on his display, not because he needed to check it, but because looking at those names reminded him why they were here. Why they had all chosen this posting on the edge of nowhere. Yuki had lost her daughter in the Tokyo floods. David's husband had died in the Detroit quarantine zone. Annie's entire squadron had burned up during the atmosphere breach at Luna Station 3. They had all come to the outpost to escape the ghosts of Earth's hardest century, to do peaceful work among the stars. The universe had other plans. 31 minutes until they opened fire, David said from the engineering station. Our shielding will hold for maybe 2 minutes against that much concentrated fire. After that, we're vapor. They don't know about the platforms, Neil said. That's our edge. They think they're attacking a research station with standard defensive fields. When those asteroids light up, their formation will break. Annie nodded. Then we hit them during the confusion. Classic ambush doctrine. The brass would be proud. Would they? Neil wondered. The human fleet had spent decades convincing the galaxy that Earth's violent past was behind them. Humanity had joined the community of spacefaring species with promises of cooperation and shared knowledge. Every colony, every outpost, every ship carried the message that humans were explorers now, not conquerors. But there was a difference between leaving violence behind and forgetting how to use it. Yuki, show me Thrax's flagship, Neil said. The main screen shifted to display the largest Drouthy vessel, a massive dreadnought that bristled with weapon ports. Intelligence estimated it carried enough firepower to glass a small continent. The Drouthy had built it to intimidate, to project power, to make other species surrender before the first shot was fired. Neil had seen ships like that before. Different designs, different flags, but the same purpose. He had been 19 during the Pacific Alliance standoff, watching kilometer-long warships face each other across the ocean while everyone waited for someone to blink first. Nobody blinked. 300 million people died in the first week. He had learned then that big ships made by confident empires shared one weakness. They expected enemies to be afraid. They built their tactics around opponents who would break and run. They never prepared for opponents who understood that survival sometimes meant going through instead of around. I'm reading their formation, David said. Classic encirclement pattern. Heavy ships at the cardinal points. Light cruisers filling gaps. They'll open with long-range bombardment to test our shields, then close in for the kill once they measure our defensive capacity. They'll never get that far, Annie said. She pulled up targeting solutions on her screen. Platform A has a clear shot at their port-side heavy cruiser. Platform D can hit 2 of their supply ships. If we coordinate the first strike properly, we can reduce their effective firepower by 30% before they even know we're shooting back. Neil watched the countdown timer. 28 minutes. What about civilian casualties? Yuki asked quietly. Everyone looked at her. She kept her eyes on her console. The drouthy crew, she continued. Most of them are probably just following orders. Regular soldiers doing what their command structure tells them. If we hit hard right away, a lot of them won't have time to evacuate. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. They gave us 1 hour to evacuate, Neil said finally. They broadcast their attack plan to make sure everyone would watch humans die. They're not here to take prisoners or accept surrender. They're here to make us an example. I know, Yuki said. I just want to make sure we all remembered that we're about to kill people. Not monsters, not machines. People who probably have families waiting for them to come home. Annie's jaw tightened. My daughter had a family waiting for her to come home. She drowned in her school when the seawalls broke. She was 7 years old, and she died scared and alone because the emergency systems failed. I'm not saying don't fight, Yuki said. I'm saying remember the cost. Remember that we're choosing this. Earth Command gave us authorization, but the trigger is in our hands. Neil looked at each of them in turn. Annie, whose daughter's picture still sat on her bunk. David, who still wore his wedding ring 15 years after his husband's death. Yuki, who had volunteered for the most remote outpost she could find because Earth held too many memories. 18 minutes, he said. Yuki, send one more message to Thrak. Plain text, no encryption. What should it say? Neil thought about Earth, about the century of fire and ice that had nearly ended human civilization, about the billions who died before the survivors learned to work together, about the children who grew up in underground cities and lunar shelters, learning to fix air recyclers before they learned to read. Tell him that humanity didn't crawl out of hell just to be someone's object lesson, Neil said. Tell him he has 18 minutes to withdraw. After that, we stop being scientists. Yuki typed the message and hit send on the main screen. The drouthy fleet continued its approach. Thrak's dreadnought maintained course, growing larger as it closed the distance, and no response came. 15 minutes, David said that Annie's hands rested on the firing controls, steady and sure. The outpost's automated systems hummed quietly, waiting for the commands that would transform them from research tools into weapons of war. Outside, hidden in the asteroid field, the platforms armed themselves in silence. The first drouthy missile struck the outpost shields at exactly the 1-hour mark. War leader Thrak apparently believed in punctuality. The impact sent ripples of blue energy across the defensive field, visible even through the viewports as crackling light. Shields holding at 98%, David reported. That was just a ranging shot. Testing our response time. Neil watched the tactical display. The drouthy fleet had tightened formation, moving into optimal firing positions with military precision. Thrak knew his business. This wasn't his first time destroying an enemy outpost. 3 more impacts, Annie said. Different vectors. They're mapping our shield geometry. The outpost shuddered as more missiles found their mark. Standard procedure for any competent commander. Probe the defenses, find the weak points, then concentrate fire where the enemy was most vulnerable. Neil had used the same tactics during the siege of New Singapore. They'll go for maximum firepower in about 30 seconds, he predicted. Full coordinated barrage from all 37 ships. They want this done in one dramatic strike. Should we return fire? Annie asked. Her finger hovered over the weapon's release. Not yet. Let them commit. On the main screen, the drouthy ships shifted position. Weapon ports glowed with building energy. Thrak was preparing his killing blow, probably composing the speech he'd give afterward about the price of human arrogance. Here it comes, David said. The space around the outpost erupted in light. Dozens of missiles and energy beams converged on the small station from every direction. The shields flared brilliant blue, then white, then started showing stress fractures as the sustained bombardment overwhelmed the defensive systems. Alarms shrieked throughout the outpost. The lights flickered. Something exploded in the lower engineering deck, sending a tremor through the structure. Shields at 40%, David shouted over the noise. 35, 30. They're going to break through. Neil counted silently. 3, 2, 1. Annie, execute Alpha Strike. All platforms, full authorization. Her hands moved in a blur across the controls. Point 11 asteroids that the Drouthy had ignored as background debris suddenly came alive. Hidden panels slid open. Weapons that had been sleeping for 5 years woke hungry. The platforms had been designed by people who remembered what it meant to fight outnumbered and outgunned. Platform A fired first. Twin rail guns sent tungsten penetrators through the void at a significant fraction of light speed. The Drouthy heavy cruiser on the port flank never saw them coming. The first penetrator punched through its forward shields like paper. The second entered through the hole the first made and tore through the cruiser's reactor core. The ship came apart in a brief, brilliant flash. Platforms B through K fired within 3 seconds of each other. The Drouthy formation, so carefully arranged for overwhelming offensive firepower, became a shooting gallery. Ships that had been focusing their weapons on the outpost suddenly faced threats from multiple directions. Their shields, calibrated to protect against frontal assault, left them vulnerable to flanking fire. Direct hits on 7 ships, Annie reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. 2 destroyed, 5 critically damaged. They're breaking formation. On the screen, the Drouthy fleet scattered like startled fish. Their disciplined attack pattern dissolved into confusion as captains reacted to threats they hadn't known existed. Some ships tried to return fire on the platforms. Others attempted to maneuver behind the asteroids for cover. A few began charging their faster-than-light drives to retreat. Target their light cruisers, Neil ordered. Don't let them regroup. The next 90 seconds turned space into an arena of violence. The platforms tracked targets with inhuman precision, firing continuously. The Drouthy returned fire, but their weapons had been positioned for attacking the outpost, not defending against distributed threats. Their commanders struggled to adapt. Platform F took a direct hit from a Drouthy dreadnought's main gun. The asteroid it hit and vaporized in a cloud of superheated rock and metal. Platform H went silent after a missile barrage found it. But the remaining 9 platforms kept firing, kept hunting. 19 ships destroyed or disabled, Annie said. 18 still combat capable, but they're retreating to maximum range. Neil pulled up the communication channel to Thrak's flagship. War Leader Thrak, this is Dr. Neil Richards of the human outpost you attempted to destroy. I believe we have something to discuss. For a long moment, no response came. Then Thrak's voice crackled through, no longer amused, no longer contemptuous. Just cold. You deceived us. This is no research station. It's exactly what we claimed it to be, Neil replied. We study asteroids and map mineral deposits. We also have defensive systems because we're not stupid. You assumed human outposts would be helpless. That was your first mistake. You have cost me 12 ships and 3,000 crew, Thrak said. The Empire will send a fleet that will burn your homeworld. Neil felt something inside him turn to ice. The same feeling he'd had standing in the ruins of New Singapore, looking at the bodies of people who had surrendered but died anyway. You should reconsider that threat, Neil said quietly. You think your tricks will work twice. You think the communication cut off. On the tactical display, new contacts appeared, not from the direction of Earth, from the direction of the Drouthy home systems. 3 human destroyers dropped out of faster-than-light travel, positioning themselves between the outpost and what remained of Thrak's fleet. About time, Annie muttered. The lead destroyer opened a channel. Outpost 77 Romeo, this is Captain Okafor of the UNES Endurance. We received your distress call and the situation report from Earth Command. Are you intact? Mostly intact, Endurance, Neil responded. The Drouthy fleet has been neutralized as a threat. 18 ships remain, but they're withdrawing. Negative on that outpost. We're reading power signatures consistent with weapons charging. They're preparing another attack run. Neil looked at the display. Okafor was right. The surviving Drouthy ships were reforming, rallying around Thrak's flagship. Even after losing more than half their fleet, they intended to continue the fight. Guess they're committed, David said. So are we, Annie replied. Neil opened the channel again. War Leader Thrak, you have one chance to withdraw. Take your remaining ships and leave. Tell your empire that humans don't start fights, but we finished them. Thrax's response came immediately. You will learn the price of defiance, human. Your entire species will learn. The Drouthy fleet surged forward. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, only 3 Drouthy ships remained capable of faster-than-light travel. Thrax's flagship wasn't one of them. The dreadnought drifted in space, its engines dead, its weapons silent. Multiple hull breaches vented atmosphere in frozen plumes. The human destroyers maintained weapons lock but held their fire. Captain Okafor had given specific orders. Disable, don't destroy. Neil stood in the Outpost communications room, watching the aftermath. Debris fields marked where proud warships had died. Escape pods dotted the void, each one containing survivors who had minutes ago been trying to kill him. The 3 functional ships are withdrawing at maximum speed, Yuki reported, running for Drouthy space. They'll reach their border in about 6 hours. Let them go, Neil said. They'll report what happened here. Maybe that'll make the Empire think twice. Annie looked up from her console. You really believe that? They just lost 34 ships. They're not going to accept that. They'll come back with a bigger fleet and better intelligence. She was right. Neil knew she was right. The Drouthy Empire didn't maintain its position through 3,000 years of galactic dominance by accepting defeats gracefully. They would respond to this humiliation with overwhelming force. Captain Okafor is hailing us, Yuki said. The captain's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. Dr. Richards, we're preparing to take the Drouthy survivors into custody. We'll need your statements for the incident report. Earth Command wants a full breakdown of what happened here. Understood, Captain. We'll transmit all sensor logs and recordings. Okafor nodded, then paused. Off the record, Doctor. That was some impressive defensive work. Most research stations would have been debris in the first minute. Where'd you learn to coordinate multiple weapons platforms like that? New Singapore, Neil said simply. I was on the defensive line when the Pacific Alliance made their push. We held for 3 weeks with whatever we could bolt together. Recognition flickered in Okafor's eyes. I read about that siege. They say it was hell on Earth. It was just hell, Neil corrected. Earth came later, after we survived. The communication ended. Neil turned to his crew. David, I need damage assessment. What's our repair timeline? 2 of the habitat modules have breaches. We can seal them within a day. The power grid took some hits, but nothing critical. We lost Platform F and Platform H completely. The rest are functional, but need ammunition resupply. David hesitated. Boss, we should talk about the other thing. What other thing? David pulled up a schematic on his screen. During the fight, I was monitoring all our systems. The weapon platforms, the shields, the standard stuff. But I noticed something. The Deep Research Lab, Section 7, it was drawing power. A lot of power. Neil felt his stomach drop. We shut that section down 3 months ago. Yeah, we did. But something in there activated during the attack. The automated systems must have triggered some kind of fail-safe protocol. Section 7. The lab where they conducted research that wasn't in any official reports. Work that Earth Command classified so deeply that even Neil didn't have full clearance for all of it. He knew they were developing advanced weapon systems. He knew some of those systems were designed not for ship-to-ship combat, but for strategic deterrence, planet killers. Show me the power draw pattern, Neil said. David brought up the graphs. The spike was unmistakable. Something in Section 7 had woken up, run through an activation sequence, then gone dormant again, all in the span of the battle. Could it have been damage from the attack? Annie asked. Negative. The lab is in the deepest part of the outpost, triple shielded. Nothing hit it. This was intentional activation. Neil accessed his command terminal and entered his security codes. The system took a moment to verify, then displayed the Section 7 status report. His blood ran cold. Project Sundial, he read aloud. Status: armed and targeted. Authorization level: Omega Black. What's Project Sundial? Yuki asked. Neil had heard rumors. Every military officer who served during the Dark Years had heard rumors about weapons so terrible that using them would mark humanity as monsters in the eyes of every civilized species. Weapons that didn't just destroy enemies, but made examples that would terrify entire civilizations into submission. It's a stellar destabilization weapon, he said slowly. Theoretical, I thought. You aim it at a star, and it triggers a cascade reaction. The star goes nova within weeks instead of billions of years. The room went silent. Everyone understood the implication immediately. It's targeting the Drouthy home star, David confirmed, reading from his screen. Coordinates locked. Authorization code already received from Earth Command. All it needs is a final execution command. Who authorized it? Annie demanded. We never asked for that level of response. Neil pulled up the transmission logs. The authorization had come through the same encrypted channel he'd used to request defensive authorization. But this hadn't been a response to his request. It had been sent automatically the moment Earth Command received his initial distress signal, a failsafe. A deterrent so terrible that humanity had hoped never to use it. They authorized it before the battle even started. Neil said, Earth Command decided that if the Drouthy were going to make an example of us, we'd make a bigger example of them. That's insane, Yuki said. The Drouthy home system has 4 inhabited planets. Over 30 billion people. You're talking about genocide. I'm not talking about anything, Neil snapped. I didn't authorize this. I didn't even know it existed. But you have the execution codes now, David said quietly. The system gave you command authority. You can fire it or you can deactivate it. But you have to choose. Neil looked at the screen showing Thrax's disabled dreadnought. Somewhere in that wreck, the war leader who had come to make humans an example was probably wondering if he'd survive to see his home again, that if Neil pressed that button, Thrax's home would become a cloud of superheated gas. Everyone he'd ever known would die. Every Drouthy in their home system would die. Billions of people who had nothing to do with this attack. But if he didn't press it, if he deactivated the weapon, what message would that send? The Drouthy had attacked a human outpost unprovoked. They had broadcast their intentions to inspire fear across the galaxy. They had made clear their intention to punish humanity for the crime of existing in what they considered their territory. Captain Okafor is retrieving something from the Drouthy flagship, Yuki said suddenly. Prisoner transport. They're bringing someone to the outpost. Minutes later, war leader Thrax stood in the airlock, bound and flanked by armed guards. He looked diminished without his command, just another soldier who had lost. Thrax's eyes held defiance even in defeat. He stood straight despite his injuries, refusing to show weakness before the humans who had destroyed his fleet. Blood from a head wound had dried in streaks across his face, dark purple against gray skin. You will die for this, he said in perfect English. The Empire does not forgive. We do not forget. Your species will be hunted across the stars until none remain. Neil studied the war leader. He saw pride, anger, and underneath it all, the same thing he'd seen in human commanders who watched their battles turn into disasters. Fear. Not fear death, but fear of being wrong. Fear that the absolute certainty that had guided a lifetime of military service might have been built on false assumptions. How many species have you said that to? Neil asked. How many outposts have you destroyed to teach that lesson? 17, Thrax said without hesitation. 17 races that spread into Drouthy territory without permission. 17 examples that maintained order across 100-star systems. It is efficient. It is necessary. It prevents larger wars. And now your example number 18, Annie said from her station. How does it feel? Thrax's gaze shifted to her. You think this changes anything? You destroyed one fleet. The Empire has thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. You cannot defeat us. We don't want to defeat you, Neil said. We want to be left alone to do our research. You made that impossible. Then you should have stayed on your homeworld. Thrax's voice carried absolute conviction. The galaxy is not a safe place for weak species. The strong take what they need. The weak either serve or die. This is the natural order. Neil walked closer to the war leader. Do you know what humans did to each other during the resource wars? We poisoned our own oceans. We burned our own forests. We launched nuclear weapons at our own cities. For 30 years, we nearly made ourselves extinct because we couldn't stop fighting over what was left. Then you understand strength, Thrax said. You understand survival. No. Neil's voice went quiet. We understand that strength without wisdom leads to extinction. We barely survived our own violence. We had to learn cooperation or die. Every human alive today is descended from people who chose to work together instead of killing each other. That's not weakness. That's evolution. Evolution. Thrak laughed, a harsh sound. You speak of evolution while you cower in metal boxes, far from your soft world. My people evolved on a planet where the atmosphere itself is toxic. We built our civilization in sealed cities for 8,000 years before we developed the technology to change our atmosphere. We know hardship. We know sacrifice. What do you know except comfort? David looked up from his console. Boss, we're getting an emergency transmission from Earth Command. Priority Omega. Neil's blood chilled. Omega priority meant something had escalated beyond normal military channels. He moved to the secure terminal and entered his codes. The message appeared in text only, no video, no audio. Just words that carried the weight of potential apocalypse. Dr. Richards, intelligence reports indicate Drouthy Empire is mobilizing full battle fleet. Estimated 300 warships. Projected arrival your location, 72 hours. Recommend immediate evacuation. However, in event you choose to remain, Project Sundial authorization remains active. Final decision rests with on-site commander. Earth stands behind whatever choice you make. Signed, Admiral Santos, Joint Command. Neil read it twice. Earth was giving the choice. Stay and fight with a weapon that could kill billions, or evacuate and let the Drouthy have their victory. Either way, humanity would face consequences. What does it say? Annie asked. They're coming back, Neil said. 300 ships in 3 days. The room went silent. Even Thrak seemed surprised. The Emperor himself authorized that fleet, he said. He intends to erase this system. Your outpost, your ships, everything. He will make this region of space a memorial to Drouthy power, or a tomb for Drouthy arrogance, Annie said. We have Project Sundial. We can end this by killing 30 billion people. Yuki's voice shook. Most of them civilians who never heard of this outpost. They're coming to kill us, Annie shot back. Not to negotiate, not to accept surrender. To erase us. You heard him. The Empire doesn't forgive. Neil looked at Thrak. If I contacted your Emperor directly, would he negotiate? No. If I offered to surrender the outpost, abandon it, leave this entire sector? No. You have embarrassed the Empire. That demands punishment beyond simple military objectives. If I told him we have a weapon aimed at your home star, ready to fire? Thrak's expression didn't change. He would assume you're bluffing. Humans are new to the galaxy. You lack the technology for stellar manipulation. Or so our intelligence reports claim. Your intelligence is wrong, David said. Show him. Neil pulled up the Project Sundial interface on the main screen. The weapon status, the targeting data, the estimated timeline for stellar collapse. All of it laid out in technical detail that couldn't be faked. Thrak's eyes widened. For the first time, his certainty cracked. That cannot be real. It's real, Neil said. And it's been aimed at your home, Star, since the moment you attacked us. Earth Command authorized it automatically. All I have to do is press one button, and everything you're trying to protect dies. You would not. No species would commit such an atrocity. Wouldn't we? Neil pulled up historical records. Images from Earth's darkest century. Mushroom clouds rising over cities. Burned landscapes where forests once grew. Underground shelters packed with refugees. Mass graves that stretched for kilometers. We did this to ourselves, Neil said. We nearly destroyed our own species in wars over resources and ideology. We know exactly what we're capable of. The only question is whether you're willing to bet 30 billion lives that we've changed enough to not do it again. Thrak stared at the images. His defiance wavered, replaced by something Neil recognized from a mirror. The look of someone who suddenly understood that their confidence had led them into a trap. You are bluffing, Thrak said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Neil's hand moved to the execution authorization panel. Your fleet arrives in 72 hours. Project Sundial will reach your home star in 60 hours. Even if you kill us, even if you destroy Earth itself afterward, your home dies first. Every drouthy who ever lived there becomes dust. Is that the memorial your emperor wants? This is madness. This is survival. Neil corrected. This is what happens when you mistake peace for weakness. Neil's finger rested on the activation panel. One touch would send a signal. Project Sundial would fire its quantum-entangled pulse across light years of space directly into the heart of the drouthy home star. The physics were elegant in their horror. The star would begin collapsing within hours, then expand in a supernova that would consume 4 planets and 23 moons, 0.30 billion lives reduced to ash and memory. You have to decide, Annie said quietly. The fleet arrives in 3 days. If we're going to use it, we need to fire now to give ourselves time to evacuate before the nova wave reaches here. Thrak stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the screen showing his homeworld, a blue-green sphere circling a yellow star. From this distance, it looked peaceful, beautiful. Neil wondered if Earth looked the same to alien eyes before humans nearly destroyed it. I need to speak with your emperor, Neil said. He will not negotiate with, I'm not negotiating. Neil's voice carried absolute certainty. I'm explaining what happens next. Give me a direct channel. Now. Thrak hesitated, then gave David the communication codes. Minutes later, the screen shifted to show the drouthy emperor. He sat on a throne of dark metal, surrounded by advisors who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The emperor himself appeared ancient, his gray skin weathered, his eyes holding the weight of ruling for longer than most species existed. Human, the emperor said. The word carried contempt. You have destroyed one of my fleets. You have captured one of my war leaders. And now you presume to contact me directly. Your arrogance knows no bounds. Your Majesty, Neil began, but the emperor cut him off. I required no explanation. No justification. My battle fleet departs within the hour. 300 ships will reduce your outpost to atoms. Then they will proceed to your homeworld and teach your species the price of defiance. This is not negotiable. This is not subject to discussion. This is inevitable. Then so is this. Neil entered the activation sequence. On the screen, the Project Sundial status changed from armed to active. I've just fired a stellar destabilization weapon at your home star. It will go nova in approximately 60 hours. Every drouthy in your home system will die. I'm sorry, but you left me no choice. The Emperor's expression didn't change. Impossible. You lack the technology. We really don't. Neil pulled up the technical specifications. During Earth's resource wars, we developed weapons designed to kill continents. Then weapons to kill planets. Then, because we're very good at destruction, we developed weapons to kill solar systems. This is one of them. We hoped we'd never use it. You made sure we had to. For the first time, doubt flickered across the Emperor's face. He gestured to someone off-screen. Seconds later, an advisor leaned in and whispered urgently. The Emperor's eyes widened. Our astronomers detect an energy spike in our home star, he said slowly. Anomalous readings, consistent with your projected timeline. Because I'm not bluffing. Because I pressed a button. Because you gave me no other option. Neil felt exhaustion crushing down on him. Your fleet can still kill us. You can still attack Earth. But your homeworld dies first. Everyone you love, everyone you've ever known, everyone who shares your species' birthplace. Gone. Was it worth it? The throne room on the other end of the transmission erupted in chaos. Advisors shouted. Military officers demanded action. The Emperor raised one hand and silence fell. Can you reverse it? The Emperor asked. Yes, I have a deactivation code, but I need something in return. Name your price. Neil had thought about this moment since the weapon activated. What price could balance 30 billion lives? What demand could justify the power he now held? Peace, he said. Real peace. Not the peace of conquest where you decide who lives and who dies. Equal peace. Mutual recognition. You acknowledge humanity's right to exist in this galaxy without permission. We acknowledge the same for every species, including yours. No more examples. No more demonstrations of power. No more treating other civilizations like problems to be solved with violence. The Emperor's jaw tightened. You asked me to abandon 3,000 years of imperial policy, to treat lesser species as equals. I'm asking you to survive, Neil corrected. Because if you send that fleet, I'll let the weapon complete its work. Your homeworld dies. Then maybe we die too. But the Empire ends. 3,000 years of civilization, erased because you couldn't accept that other species have a right to exist. You would truly do it? Kill billions to save yourselves? Neil thought about New Singapore, about the children in the underground shelters during the volcanic winter, about his sister who died in the Tokyo floods, about every human who had survived Earth's century of horrors. Yes, he said, we would, because we learned during our worst years that sometimes survival means doing terrible things. We hope we'd left that behind. We try to be better, but we remember how to be monsters when necessary. Do you really want to find out if we're bluffing? The Emperor stared at him for a long moment. Behind him, advisors waited for orders. Military commanders stood ready to either launch the fleet or recall it. If I agree, the Emperor said slowly, if I recall the fleet and acknowledge your terms, you will deactivate the weapon immediately, and you will abandon this outpost? Leave Drouthy territory? No. Neil's voice hardened. This isn't your territory. This is unclaimed space. We built our outpost here legally according to galactic law. We stay, but we'll agree to notification protocols. If you want to know what we're doing, ask. If you have concerns about our activities, talk to us. Like equals, like civilized species. The Emperor looked at Thrak. Your assessment, war leader? Thrak took a long breath. They are telling the truth, Your Majesty. I have seen their weapon systems. I have read their history. They are the most dangerous kind of enemy. The kind who doesn't want to fight but will burn down the galaxy if pushed. Then we are at an impasse, the Emperor said. If I back down, I show weakness. Other species will challenge the Empire. If you don't back down, there is no Empire to challenge, Neil said. Your choice is simple, pride or survival. The screen went dark. For 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours, nothing happened. The outpost crew waited. Captain Okafor's destroyers maintained position. Somewhere in the void, 300 Drouthy warships prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel. Then the screen lit up again. The Emperor sat alone on his throne now, advisors dismissed. I am 3,000 years old, he said quietly. I have ruled for longer than your species has had written language. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have made decisions that determined the fate of worlds. He paused, and I have never been afraid until today. I don't want you to be afraid, Neil said. I want you to understand. I understand that you are willing to become genocidal murderers to protect yourselves. That makes you no different than any other violent species we have pacified. No, Yuki spoke up. It makes us exactly like you. You built your empire on the threat of overwhelming violence. You maintained peace by making examples. You demanded submission because you had the power to enforce it. We're showing you what happens when someone else has that power. How does it feel? The Emperor's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect or recognition, or perhaps just weariness. Very well, he said. I recall the fleet. I agree to your terms. Humanity will be recognized as an equal participant in galactic affairs. This outpost may remain, and I will personally ensure that this incident is recorded as a lesson to my successors. The lesson being, never assume peace means weakness. Neil entered the deactivation code. The project's sundial status changed from active to safe. The weapon powered down, its terrible purpose unfulfilled. It's done, Neil said. Your star is safe. The Emperor nodded slowly. And my people will live to see another day because I swallowed my pride. This is not a victory for either of us, human. This is merely survival. Sometimes that's enough, Neil said. The transmission ended. The outpost fell silent except for the hum of life support and the quiet beeping of monitoring systems. Outside, Captain Okafor's ships maintained their vigil. The debris field from the battle drifted slowly, a memorial to poor decisions and hasty judgments. We did it, Annie said. We actually did it. We threatened to kill 30 billion people, Yuki corrected. We stood on the edge of genocide and only stepped back because they blinked first. They attacked us unprovoked, Annie argued. They were wrong, Neil interrupted, and we were willing to do something even worse to stop them. That doesn't make us heroes. That makes us survivors who did what we had to do. David pulled up the casualty reports from the battle. 3,000 Drouthy dead. Platform F's crew of 2 killed when it was destroyed. Dozens injured on both sides. Is this what happens now? Yuki asked. Every time someone threatens us, we point a planet killer at them and demand respect. No, Neil said firmly. This is what happens when we have no other options. Earth Command built these weapons as a last resort. Today we found out what last resort actually means. I hope we never have to find out again. He looked at the display showing Earth, distant but still visible as a blue point of light among the stars. Humanity had crawled up from that world, scarred by its own violence, hoping to be better among.